Got to get on our last summer fun.
Yes, that's for sure. So it's 4 o'clock, so I guess we'll get started. Welcome everyone to another All Hands on Deck presentation with Dr. Larry Maheady. You can check out his bio on the website, on the PDS website for more information. Just to let you know that the session is being recorded and we ask you to mute during the presentation. Please take a look on our PDS website for recordings of sessions and for follow-up sessions this fall to discuss in a smaller setting virtually these topics that we're discussing in these 2 weeks. And then Dr. Del Prado Hill periodically will be putting in the evaluation form so that you can let us know how things are going and if you have any feedback about All Hands on Deck in this session. So without any further ado, please take it away, Larry.
All right. Well, good afternoon, and thank you all for joining our session today entitled Building Capacity Through Peer Tutoring. My name's Larry Maheady, and I want to thank you for giving up the last remaining moments and days of your summer vacation to join us today. To say it's been an interesting year or two in the schools, it would definitely be an understatement. I'd also like to thank my colleagues, Kelly and Pixita, for putting together this amazing professional development series called All Hands on Deck. The intent is really to leverage the resources that we have through the Buffalo State professional development schools, work together and help each other out as much as we can. So I'm looking forward to it. And if I can be of any assistance to folks along the way, please let me know. As you see, we're going to be building on the work of Doug Fisher and his colleagues and the text rebound. For those of you who had a chance to see Doug's presentation the other day, it was really amazing. As a novice in technology and here with colleague support, I'm envious of his skills, and hopefully I can come close to doing some things along the way here. As means of introduction, for those of you who probably don't know me, I'm currently a faculty member in the Exceptional Ed Department at Buffalo State. I'm entering my 9th year. Before that, I taught for 29 years in the Department of Curriculum and Instruction at SUNY Fredonia. And I also taught for 4 years at Michigan State, worked as a school psychologist, and I was a middle school teacher for the emotionally disturbed. I also made buttons for mobile home furniture. So you can either look at this as I'm a guy with a lot of experience or somebody who just can't hold a job. Oh, I'll wait for the laughter to die down. In terms of my work with peer tutoring, I got started in it over 40 years ago, trying to figure out how can we leverage the assistance of kids, peers, in helping one another. While I was at Fredonia, one of my first efforts, I taught a class called the Introduction to Exceptional Children. And for about 12 of those years, we created an after-school tutoring program. I basically taught elementary and secondary students who had no experience working with the program in the Dunkirk public schools. And for 10 weeks, each semester, twice a week, my students would go out in pairs and they would tutor one student with special needs, either at the elementary level, and they did that basically in literacy methods, and at the secondary level, they tutored in their content area. That program we started in 1992. It's still going. It's run now by the Dunkirk schools. Nobody who developed the program or worked in it is still there. So my public school colleagues took it over and have used it to their benefit ever since. A lot of the tutoring methods and approaches I'll be talking about today, we also have done some research on. And basically, we're looking at three different things. First, do they work? Are they effective? Do they help kids? Are they feasible for teachers to use? Can you practically implement them given all the other things that are going on in the classroom? And are they acceptable? Do teachers like the programs? Do kids like the programs? And oftentimes those aspects get overlooked, but what we learned over time is if kids or teachers don't like what you're bringing to the table, they simply won't use it. So it really doesn't matter how effective or feasible it is. And until COVID came around, for the past few years, I've also been volunteering in a local middle school 3 to 4 days a week, working with their behavior teams. So I try to stay current in what's going on, and hopefully some of that will be useful for everyone today. As we go along, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, please feel free to put them in the chat box. My colleagues, Kelly and Pixita, will be monitoring for me. And I built in a couple of spots along the presentation where we can discuss some of the questions or concerns before moving on. I also put my email on the cover slide and the PowerPoint. I'd be happy to send to anyone and make it available if you'd like. But I'd also, if anyone gets interested in doing any of these things, just feel free to contact me. I like doing this stuff, and I usually learn more about it by working with teachers and seeing how they use it and what happens. So again, feel free to get in touch if you feel the need. Basically, the goals for today's session, I just want to introduce and define peer tutoring, describe a variety of ways or options that you might use it, and the intent is really to expand our instructional power. I'll be pretty upfront about the advantages and disadvantages of the different tutoring approaches. Nothing to hide today. And the overall goal is just really to whet your appetite, make you aware of some different options. If there's some things that catch your interest, provide assistance in letting you do that and work on it over the coming year. And we do have some follow-up sessions scheduled that I have the dates listed at the end. So they would be open to talking about if you've tried things, what happened, good, bad, ugly. You want to try things but didn't have enough information. Any of those things are game. So before we get started, I'd like to share what little good news I know about COVID-19. I was able to obtain some of your current plans for your school districts for opening school next year. As you can see, it's all clearly laid out for everyone. We all know specifically what we're going to be doing. And I was also able to synthesize some of the feedback from parents after teaching their kids at home for the past year or so. As you can see, they've put out a cry for help. They say their kids won't listen to them, won't stay in their seats or complete their homework. As teachers, we should all feel comfortable saying, well, they don't act like that in my class. What are you doing wrong? Or what are you doing to cause this? So a little humor to share with folks as you begin the school year. All right, so peer tutoring's supplemental instructional service can be used for multiple purposes. Most of my involvement has been in remediation and using tutoring programs to help students who are struggling, many of them with disabilities, but in the Dunkirk school districts where I've done most of my work, we have a lot of English language learners, but more than anything, we have a lot of kids living in poverty, and they have struggled academically at times. And so we tried to provide services to improve their ability to achieve and other things along the way. One of the things I want to suggest at the outset, tutoring comes in a lot of forms. You have a lot of options when you start to think about it. There's some programs out there that look at adults tutoring students. And that's what we tried to do in our teacher preparation programs, send our candidates out to work with elementary and secondary students. around tutoring. We can also use the kids in our schools, in our classrooms. We have an option for same age tutoring. We can use CrossAge, something that might be less familiar to you, reverse role tutoring, and also class-wide peer tutoring systems. So I just wanted to describe them a little bit for you, tell you how they operate, some advantages and disadvantages. Here's a schematic model of the most common K12 tutoring models that are out there. As you can see, it's an instructional strategy designed to get students to work together. They usually work in pairs. And the purpose is to practice and master academic skills and concepts. In terms of same age, we usually have students within the same class or in the same age group tutoring one another. In CrossAge, it usually involves using older students to tutor younger students. For example, middle school students might work with elementary students, high school students might work with middle school students, and so forth. When we start looking at same age tutoring, one option that you have is, do we want the tutoring to be one dimensional or one directional? One student tutors the other, or there's options for it to be reciprocal, where both students take turns being tutors and tutees. Advantage of the reciprocal tutoring seems to be they both get practice in equal status roles. There doesn't seem to be as much stigma attached to being a tutee because everybody's a tutee. And by being a tutor and tutee, you get double practice in the same sessions. At the bottom, people in the past few years, actually it's about 25 years now, have said, what if we take that notion of students tutoring one another in the same classroom and have everybody tutoring each other simultaneously? So I want to share with you two different models. One's called the Juniper Gardens Class-Wide Peer Tutoring Program, and that's the one that I've had most experience with. And then there's a program out of Vanderbilt called Peer Assisted Learning Strategies. So in the traditional peer tutoring or same age, what usually happens is we pair kids up, and traditionally we've used or asked higher achieving students to tutor lower achieving. Again, there's no need to do that, but that seems to be the way we've functioned for years. It's based on the assumption that there's mutual benefits for both students, that high achieving students gain or learn from tutoring their classmates, and that lower achieving students benefit from working with higher performing peers. There's really strong empirical support for peer tutoring models. I'll share some data with you later, but one-on-one tutoring is considered to be one of the most powerful instructional interventions available. It's most powerful when it's delivered by trained teachers or trained adults, but I can imagine you're probably thinking, when do I have time to work one-on-one with one of my students? But it's also highly effective if we train other adults, classroom assistants, college students, or peers, and we train them to tutor as well. So there's a strong database. The problem that we've run into in our school system, which is sort of unique, is if we use the model where we rely on higher performing students to tutor lower performing, it usually reduces our tutoring pool. We usually end up with the same students providing tutoring in math to the same students, the same high performers to low performers. So we go back to the same kids over time. And if we do that a lot, sometimes parents get upset. The comments that I've heard in the past is, I've sent my son or daughter I send them to learn, not to be tutoring classmates that are struggling. So you get a lot of stigma stuff about it. And I want to talk about how we might address that as we go through. I think the notion of reciprocal models and class-wide models take a lot of that away, because all students are engaged and they're all involved in both roles. The interesting thing to me, though, is I think in general in the United States, we've underutilized peer tutoring. If you go to European school system or Asian school systems, they do a lot of peer tutoring. A lot of their kids do after school tutoring program, and they usually use a level system where students are one level above those that they tutor. So they tutor students one level below them, while they're also getting tutored by students one level above them. A number of years ago, I heard in places like Oxford and Cambridge, you really didn't even have to go to class, but what you had to do was pass oral and written exams. And all of those services were individualized through tutoring. So I think at some level, our school systems can probably make more systematic use of the traditional tutoring system. To expand the tutoring pool, though, what we might take a look at is, what if we train older students to tutor younger peers? The first thing it does is it opens the tutoring pool to include older students who might be lower achieving. Although they might be lower achieving fifth graders, they're still more competent if they're tutoring students who might be struggling in second or third grade level. My wife taught third grade in the Dunkirk schools for 35 years. And probably for 10 of those years, she worked with a colleague, a first grade teacher. And what she did is she trained some of her students, and she called them her reluctant learners, students that weren't super motivated in a different content area. She worked in reading and sent them down to work with first graders. And she taught them how to present material, how to ask questions, how to give feedback, and how to monitor their students' performance, their tutees' performance. And there was a couple things that happened. One, the older kids seemed to like it. They seemed to like going down and being a teacher. And the little kids lost their mind. The tutors are coming. The tutors are coming. They'd be shaking. They got to hang out and work with an older student in the back of the room or at the table off to the side. And they seemed to love it. The student who was difficult to teach reading in her third grade classroom went down and basically practiced reading 30 minutes a day, 2 or 3 times a week, but just practiced with the younger student. They read to the students, they had the students read to them, they questioned their tutees, the tutees questioned them. And it was a nice opportunity for students who had normally been struggling to be put in a position where they could not only succeed, but they were big deals. And again, the little kids loved having them come in. All the other peers were just smiling and everything. If you're looking at something in a CrossAge program, in your building, if you can find one other teacher who might be interested in setting up the program with you. Doesn't have to be elaborate. It doesn't have to be all the students. I would probably suggest starting with your students who are most likely and most receptive to doing it. But I'll be honest with you, after a while, we took some of our kids who really had behavioral challenges and they became some of the best tutors. At first, they had trouble saying positive things. So we had to work through that and practice how do you say nice things and positive feedback to younger students. The interesting thing, if you look in the literature, there's been a ton of research studies done on CrossAge tutoring. They say the best range is about 2 to 4 years. So it could be a fifth grader with a third grader, fourth grader with second or first. There's over 30 research studies. Some of the things they've reported is that if you spend time preparing and training the tutors, they can learn their roles very well. They can learn to use tutoring procedures with a high degree of accuracy. The really nice and positive news is that both of them seem to improve in achievement. You get a bang from teaching other kids how to read by reading to them and listening to them read, questioning them, and so forth. So both tutors and tutees make academic gains. And the other thing is there's high levels of satisfaction. The teachers who have used it really like it. And the kids who have been involved in it give it high thumbs up kinds of ratings. So it's another option to consider. A less utilized option is something called reverse role tutoring. And this has been most prevalent, I'd say, in Utah. And you say, God, why Utah? Well, the class sizes at the elementary level are between 30 and 38 in Utah. So they use a lot of tutoring programs. And what happens in reverse role tutoring, it's still cross-age, but you take older students with disabilities or students who might be struggling learning, and they teach younger peers who don't have disabilities. And there's a couple of ways you can do this. In other words, you might be able to use a fifth grader with a learning disability, tutoring a third grader who doesn't have a disability, but he's struggling. He needs more practice in reading or in math. And what this does, again, it puts students who traditionally might have been struggling academically, it puts them in an instructional or high status position. And it gives them skills on how to teach vocabulary, how to give feedback, how to monitor progress, and so forth. So you can use it in content areas. And the only difference is now we're actually using students with IEPs to tutor students without IEPs. And what people have argued is this, again, there's some evidence that it improves academic performance of both tutors and tutees. There's evidence that it improves interpersonal relationships. There's also evidence that it demystifies inappropriate beliefs or attitudes about kids with disabilities. If we can send a student with a behavior disorder into a classroom where they bring their tutoring materials, tutor up a storm, teach their younger partners, give them positive feedback and constructive feedback, it demystifies our beliefs about behavior disorders or learning disabilities because they're actually pretty competent in front of their peers. One little thing I would also throw in there, even if you don't look at academics, we might take things that some of our students with disabilities are particularly good at, computer programs, communication symbols, gaming, things that they're really competent at, and have them teaching other students that don't have those disabilities. When I was teaching middle school, self-contained class for middle schoolers with behavior disorders, one of the things that we used as an incentive was they could earn time playing ping pong. And for some reason in this rural section of Pennsylvania, ping pong was big. And these kids earned so much time playing ping pong. They got really good at it. And so then they started inviting other kids that were peers, but in general ed classroom. Hey, why don't you come down to my resource room and we'll play a little ping pong? It was amazing because these other kids, all I had to make sure was that they weren't wagering on it. But basically, they had a skill. They invited classmates in, and most of the time they kicked butt. They were really good at what they did, and it was a status builder for them. So there's a lot of things that our kids with disabilities can do well. And some of these things lend themselves well to instruction. And if we can capitalize on involving them in a program, again, the key is really to prepare them how to tutor. Most of them and kids in general don't know how to do that. So it's really important that we prepare whomever we're using to tutor, that we teach them how to do it in the first place. Okay, a little bit more, and then we're gonna stop and see if you guys have any questions. I mentioned 2 different class-wide tutoring models. And I got involved in these programs early on because I was working primarily with general education teachers. And it was really difficult for me to ask teachers to do things specifically or special for students who at the time we were saying were mainstreamed into the classroom. We were adding new students into a general ed classroom, and it was asking a lot of the general ed teachers to ask them to do something special or extra for our students with disabilities. So I ran across the Juniper Gardens Children's Project, and it was a class-wide tutoring program. And so the way the teacher set it up was everybody was tutoring everybody at the same time. And so there was no special accommodation per se for the students with disabilities. Everybody was involved in the game. So the Juniper Gardens model, when you hear that, it says, oh God, where do you work? I work at Juniper Gardens. Doesn't that sound like a beautiful place to go to work in the morning? It was one of the toughest areas I'd ever been in my life. It's in inner city, Kansas City, Kansas, 99% poverty rate. It was right in a large housing complex. And when I went there, the offices of Juniper Gardens were in the basement of a liquor store. And everybody had to be out of the building by 5 o'clock. And they pushed all the computers and everything into a safe. And when you left, there were no stop signs. They were all yield signs because you weren't allowed to stop. So that took away the beauty of Juniper Gardens. At least they had a nice name. Well, I went into the classrooms and I watched them using this program. And it was developed for grades 1 to 6. And it was used in reading, math, and spelling. I was just blown away by the fact that how engaging it was for everybody. Everybody was working at the same time. They were all talking to one another, and they were just excited. It was short duration, 20 minutes a day, couple days a week, but these kids did much more work than I had seen in any of the classrooms I had gone to. We brought the program back to Fredonia and said, well, sure, it works in inner city Kansas City, but how is it going to fare in Western New York and Buffalo? Well, we started using it in Dunkirk elementary schools, primarily in math and spelling at the time. And then later on, and again, we got the same results. Kids loved it, improved achievement. Teachers liked the fact that it could be done on a class-wide basis and that it seemed to help a lot of the kids, not just kids that we were emphasizing at the time. We then took the program and said, can this stuff work at the secondary level? We did a number of studies in the Buffalo City schools, Riverside High School, secondary science, social studies, 9th and 10th grade. I worked with a colleague of mine, Judy Horace, who was there at the time, and had the same kinds of effects at that level. So there's an enormous database on the effectiveness, over 36 research studies that have been completed. There's real nice training manuals and procedures available, resource packets. Last time I looked for resources online, the training manuals were $19.95. That's $19.95. It was very cost effective and efficient and interesting model. The important point to keep in mind here, and it's true with all of the tutoring things that we talk about, these are really designed as alternative practice activities. There's not a whole lot of evidence that kids are really good teachers of one another of content or skills that they don't know well. So whenever we use any of these tutoring programs, it always follows teacher-led instruction. And it always requires teacher monitoring. What we always had trouble, or what we tried to do, is figure out where does it fit in to teacher schedules. And at the time we were using it instead of independent seat work time or independent practice time. Now, kids still need that time, but we were able to find in the schedule. And so what would happen is we weren't adding on to what teachers were doing. Instead of them sending kids to work independently, they would send them to work in their tutoring pairs and their tutoring teams. Now, this model was used primarily for increasing basic fluency in basic skills. So reading, oral fluency, vocabulary development. At the secondary level, content acquisition and retention, vocabulary, factual knowledge, and so forth. Wasn't really designed for facilitating thinking skills or problem solving. This was more of a skill building approach. And there are other peer systems we could use for those other things. The other thing that's interesting I'd throw in here is the whole system was designed to help kids improve academically, but every time we've done it, we always do consumer satisfaction surveys with teachers and kids. And on the questions at the end, and kids always filled these out anonymously and independently, they always reported that other kids thought they were smarter and that other kids liked them more, even though that was never the intent. It seemed to be a nice positive offshoot. So what happens, just to give you a quick overview, at the elementary level, the class is randomly divided into 2 competing teams each week. After students are in teams, the teachers pair them up, and those tutoring pairs and teams stay the same for 1 week. There's a systematic or structured tutoring procedure. It really is now what we call I do, we do, you do. So it's a modeling and guided practice. It's reciprocal. So for 7 minutes, one student's a tutor. When the bell rings, they reverse roles and the other students to tutor. The kids can earn points, and they earn points for correctly reading words, answering comprehension questions, solving math problems. They earn individual points. The individual points are combined into team scores, and there's a winning team of the week. And the winning team of the week usually is that team gets a certificate. They sign all their names, and it's publicly posted in the classroom. And that's about, I mean, if this is an area that excites individuals or you have interest in, this could certainly be a follow-up that we could work on. I've got much more information on it that we could deal with. We got the same stuff, which is interesting at the secondary level. And from Riverside, we got about a 2 grade level improvement in students' report card grades in classes where they were using class-wide peer tutoring. So again, that's more stuff we can share. The other program that I certainly recommend that you check out is something called Peer-Assisted Learning Strategies. It was developed by Doug and Lynn Fuchs at the university, or at Vanderbilt University. They have 2 programs. One's called PALS Reading, and one's PALS Math. And there's two versions. They have a K2 version, and then they have grades 3-5 or 3-6 in both reading and math. In reading, they teach students basic literacy skills like vocabulary, summarizing, paraphrasing, and comprehension skills. And they collect a lot of data on student attitudes and beliefs toward reading and math. So not only do they get improved achievement, but kids seem to like reading and math more after participating in the PALS program. It has two coaching components, coaching and practice, and it's a much more extensive program. And what they usually do is recommend the teachers implement it over a 4 to 6 week period of time. So you start with one skill set, the kids practice that, then you add a second and a third and fourth. So that was a real shorthand version of what we talked about. But if we could just take a couple minutes and normally do something, if this was face-to-face, we do a little write, pair, share. Where we just ask you to write the most important or relevant information about tutoring so far, or how might you use peer tutoring to build teaching capacity this year? If you could jot any of those things down in the chat box, and if Kelly or Pixita can read them aloud, just like to get your feedback on what you think about this stuff so far.
So it seems like there's my post, and it was Samantha, I think. We talked about the emotional benefits as well. And so she could use the tutoring to make a stronger classroom community, not only for academics, but social emotional learning, which is something that we're going to have to focus on a lot during the upcoming school year.
I see some notions here that can use peer tutoring to make a stronger class community. Again, we noticed that a lot with the class-wide systems. What happens in those programs is the partners and the teams change every week. So during the school year, everybody gets to work with everyone else. There's no cliques or those kinds of things. Work with peer tutoring. Mixed results. Again, I think that's a possibility. I mean, one of the things we need to consider is if we try something, if we knew it was going to work in advance, we probably wouldn't have to worry much about teaching if we knew what we're doing works. If what we do is working sometimes, maybe not all the time, working with some kids, but maybe not all of them. If it seems like something that we want to keep, well, one of the first things we might do is try to change the way we're doing it. See, maybe we just need to do it a little bit more often. Maybe we need to prepare the kids better to do it. Maybe we're asking them to do too much. But if it seems like something that we're involved in and we're getting mixed results, again, if it seems worthwhile, we can change the program. We can change how we do it. And I would certainly say if we're seeing social benefits and if kids like it, then I'd certainly stay in the game there. Let me see what else we got. Using some kids who struggle. Peer support. Right. There's a comment here that the tutoring supports Doug Fisher's philosophy on accelerating learning as well. Good stuff. Thank you. Thank you very much. So again, I touched on some of this early on, but why use it? Well, it seems to get multiple benefits, which is hard to do sometimes. It seems to be a nice way to improve student achievement, but a lot of times we also get the improved interpersonal relationship. I'd also add to that one of the things that happens is if we get good at using peers as instructional assistants for one another, it expands our own teaching repertoire. I mean, one of the biggest challenges we have is if I had more time or if I had more help, I could meet more students' needs. What I'd suggest is a lot of times when we walk in the classroom, all those little faces looking back at us are potential instructional resources. If we can help them learn to teach one another, then that allows us to maximize our instructional power. One of the things, if you begin to follow Doug Fisher's work and John Hattie, in addition, the visible learning, one of the things that you see in a lot of their work is rating programs or outcomes on the basis of effect sizes. Now, I could probably talk about how you calculate effect sizes, but there'd be a lot of blank screens going around here for a while. The big idea is a meta-analysis basically takes all the existing research and condenses it, says 50 studies have been done, puts all the data in and says collectively, what's the overall effect of this intervention? And if you look at this, well-designed adult tutoring programs like reading recovery and peer tutoring programs have been shown to improve elementary and secondary students' reading and math achievement with effect sizes between 0.7 and 0.9. Anything above 0.40 is considered to be a strong or large effect size. If you look at the diagram to the right there, you see there's actually things that we do in education that decrease student achievement. You would think we wouldn't do those things. You would think we would stop doing those things. But what are those things? Grade retention, suspension, social promoting. Those all have negative effects on students in terms of achievement. We get some impact of just normal growth and developmental effects. As teachers, we contribute a large part, as you've heard a number of times, one of the biggest impact on student achievement is teacher behavior. So you guys make a big difference, and you can see you bring that up. Everything in the blue side, the zone of desired effects, are simply other practices that have been shown to raise achievement to even higher levels. So the peer tutoring programs we're talking about tend to fall in that zone of positive effects. Here's the interesting part, and there were a few comments in the chat box about this. Peer tutoring, and it's surprising because it's something I think we probably should have known simply by the fact that we're teachers. Peer tutoring deepens the learning for those who do the teaching. This is a diagram that's been around, a learning pyramid that's been around for over 50 years now. And what it's done is it's looked at the effects of different instructional practices on the average retention rate of not only children, but also adults. And what it shows that is, if our learners, our students are passive, that we get minimal retention. So when we stand up and lecture, on average, we get about 5% retention. When we read, we retain about 10%, or someone reads to us. When we add in audio visuals like we're doing here, we get another bump up in retention. And when we add modeling or demonstration, you get another bump. But the bump's only up to about 30% of what we teach is actually retained. Where we begin to make a difference is when we activate the learners, where we get them engaged in the process. So when we get students to talk about what they're reading, writing, solving problems, when we get them to practice by doing, and again, this is what our coaching models are built on, we get more change in teacher practice with coaching because teachers have a chance to try things out, get feedback, give each other feedback, see how it works. But look at what has the highest retention rate, teaching others how to use something. So that's what we're doing in tutoring models. We're asking our students to teach others how to do something. So when someone says, well, you're not really teaching, you have those kids tutoring each other. How do you call that teaching? This is what I bring out. Sure, they're working with one another, but they're spending their time in a reciprocal tutoring program. They're both tutors and tutees. One's talking, the other's reading or writing, and then they reverse roles. So they're spending all of their time teaching one another or actively practicing what they're doing. What I always tried to talk with my students about is that we have to be more instructionally diverse. We have to be really skilled at teaching kids a lot of things. We have to be good teachers ourselves. We need to know how to lead group discussion, how to teach students how to do things. You know, we need to be good at teacher-led instruction. We also have to build in opportunities for our students to work independently so they can regulate their own practice. If we give them no opportunities to work and use their own strategies on how to learn, cognitive, metacognitive strategies, they have difficulty learning to do that. We now have technology to assist us. That allows us to assist scaffold learning, and there's a lot of instructional technologies we can use. What I suggest to my students is peer teaching methods are simply another set of strategies to expand our repertoire. We have to be able to do all of these things, and that the peer teaching methods really add to our own instructional diversity. In addition to tutoring, I do a lot of things in cooperative learning as well. And so those models are really based on the same notion, peers spending time working and teaching one another things to do. Again, we looked at a lot of these benefits, improved achievement, improved interpersonal relationship, enhanced personal and social development, more positive learning environments, increased student motivation and satisfaction. In the class-wide peer tutoring stuff we've done, these kids earn team points daily, and they add all of their team points through the week. And then on Fridays, like in spelling, they used to take a Friday spelling test, and they took those independently. And we took all of the points that they earned on the Friday spelling test and added them to their team totals during the week to see who won. They went crazy. They wanted to know who had the most points. What do they get? They love signing their names on a certificate. I can't believe we got away with that for 15 years. All they did was sign their name, and we started posting it outside the principal's office, but then they told us that was a fire hazard, and we had to post it in our own classrooms. And so, but it was amazing. They wanted to be the greatest team of all eternity that had the most points. So it was just a fun atmosphere, but the thing was, the points didn't really matter because the following week you started with 0 and you had to earn points again. And it really didn't matter how many points they got. I thought, man, if we could just get away with Team of the Week certificate, we'd be a better world here. Um, I'm real clear with people about there are issues that you need to consider if we're going to use peers as part of the instructional process. And part of it's really an ethical concern. Most kids don't come to school prepared to be teachers or how to instruct their classmates. And if we don't prepare them to do that and they fail, we're putting them in a situation that really they shouldn't have been in the first place. They could get grief from their classmates. He's not teaching me right. I failed because of Jimmy. All these kinds of comments. And that's one ethical kind of issue. There's a potential for misuse. We taught, we had prepared a whole group of teachers to use class-wide peer tutoring. And one of the teachers used to leave the classroom when the tutoring was going on. And I mean, the kids still tutored, but not for very long. And they started, inflating their scores and doing all these other things. If we don't monitor what they do, they'll change the procedures. They'll make them easier or they'll skip steps. And again, sometimes the procedures won't work simply because they weren't implemented the right way. So whenever we do the tutoring, we either post the tutoring procedures up on a whiteboard or we give the kids a little sheet on the desks that shows step-by-step how you do the procedure. I go to a lot of these workshops and say, and I'll be clear with you, the time it takes, certainly initially, is to prepare the kids to do it. We actually have to teach them how to do it. And what we would do is we would teach them as a whole group. I would model it or the teacher would model it. Then we'd call up a pair to demonstrate, and they might do it with me or with the teacher. Then we get two more pairs to practice. And then we'd have everybody practice and we'd walk around and give them feedback. Yep, that's the right way to do it. That's how you correct. That's how you give good feedback and so forth. If you look at the class-wide models, it'll increase the noise level. Surprisingly, when we started doing this in the middle school, I thought the elementary school kids would be wild, but the middle school kids lost their minds. I think it's just part of being in middle school, but they got loud quickly. And a lot of it was cheering and high-fiving, but that can be a problem in some schools. So again, if you're interested in things like class-wide peer tutoring, those were timed programs. So all we did was we had everybody stop tutoring, put their pencils down, and we had a 30-second timeout. And then when everything got quiet, we started the timer again. So what happens in that system, when their pencils are down, they can't earn any points. So it tends to quiet down quickly. There's some student bickering and complaining. And all I would say is initially pair kids that you think are going to get along just till they learn how to use the tutoring methods. Once they know how to do it, then you can start to pair up kids who don't get along and use it as an opportunity to teach them that complaining and bickering isn't going to work in the system. Point inflation, that used to happen when kids earned points. For that teacher that would leave the classroom on a Tuesday, he'd be there and the team total was like 86 points. He'd leave the room on Wednesday, come back, and they had 986 points. So there seemed to be a little point inflation if no one was around to monitor. But again, these are all things that we could prevent just by structuring the programs. One of the things I would ask here, and you can write this in the chat box, But this is just the muddiest point. Up to this point, what's the most unclear idea that I've presented up to this point? What made the least sense? And if you look off to the right, there's actual steps on how you might do this in your own class. And the idea would be this is something we would do as a formative assessment at the end of a lesson, simply asking the kids to tell us what's the least clear thing that we learned today. They write it on an index card, put it in a box, no names. We look at the cards or the papers after they leave, and at least tells us what didn't make that much sense from what we just taught them. So if you would jot in the chat box anything that was unclear, I can try to answer that and get back to you. Just to finish up our time, again, if we use tutoring, it's designed to be used as an alternative practice activity. I would establish a regular tutoring schedule. I'd make it like a real job or part of the instructional routine, depending on the age of kids. For third grade up, we used to do about 20 minutes a day, 2 to 3 times a week of class-wide peer tutoring. With the younger kids, our tutoring sessions were only 10 minutes. They were 5 minutes as a tutor, and then they reversed roles for the last 5 minutes. We usually train the students how to present the materials. We've used flashcards, manipulatives, all kinds of information. We teach them how to provide positive, how to monitor their 2T's performance. Again, usually by third grade, we're able to teach them. Usually what it is a 1-minute checkout at the end of a session. They sort of quiz each other on what they know and don't know, and make a little pile of what I know, what's unknown. And that gives us some feedback on how they're doing day to day. The other thing I'd suggest, if you do any of these tutoring approaches, start with real easy material. Start with the lowest skill level material, because what we want them to do is practice tutoring to learn the methods. So what they're doing is the 2T is getting everything right, or most everything right, and the tutor's giving a lot of positive feedback. It builds up behavioral momentum, and then we act shocked. Whoa, I never thought you guys would be able to do this. And then we gradually increase the challenge or difficulty level. Again, here's 10 steps for peer teaching success. I think most of the things we've already included. The notion of partner with another class for CrossAge or reverse role tutoring. I like the reciprocal tutoring programs as opposed to unidirectional. And for some of our kids, we might need to be concerned about confidentiality in talking about things like that. I've added some resource material for you to look at. A really, really good source is the Peer Tutoring Resource Library. If you just go online and Google it, they have tons of information, training manuals, videos. They put a lot of information on Juniper Gardens program, PALS program. They direct you to a lot of resources. Again, I'll check questions. If any of you want to dialogue with me past this time, again, really feel free to email me. Another thing you might think about is, as thoughts to jot down, the most likely peer tutoring program I might use is blank, or I might use it for this. And we could use that information as the basis. These are the 3 follow-up dates that we have scheduled. I'm open for suggestions on what we do those times. I don't know how much opportunity you'll have to try anything up to that point, but we can spend time discussing, gearing up to do it. Any questions you might have, and we can go from there.
Thanks so
I
much,
hope
Larry.
this makes- yeah.
Sorry, there was a question in the chat. If you're doing, this is from Samantha, if you're doing whole class tutoring with a large class, how do you make sure that they're not just giving each other the answers while you are with another group?
Okay, can you say that again? I couldn't hear it.
Oh, sorry. If you're doing whole class tutoring with a large class, how do you make sure that they are not just giving each other the answers while you are with another group?
Good point. You definitely have to move. You have to move around and in unexpected directions. One of the things we used to use, at least with the class-wide peer tutoring, we'd give bonus points for good tutoring behaviors, and we'd give them for actually following the procedures. And we'd actually give those points in the vicinity of people who weren't using good tutoring procedures. We'd stand next to them and give bonus points to the other group. I mean, the other things that we can do is, depending on the age, I wouldn't call them out at that point. What I would try to do is use proximity first, move closer, see if that decreases it. Because a lot of times if we just move close to them, that decreases it. And if we're moving away and we notice that it's reappeared, I think I would talk to them at another point, probably privately, and say, oh, I don't know if this was happening, but, and reinforce what they should be doing and why that's important that they do it. I think that's where I would start. One of the things I would avoid, and again, this is a lot of the kids that struggle in tutoring are a lot of the kids that we've had that have had trouble with behavioral challenges. And the problem is what we've done in the past is exclude them from tutoring because of inappropriate behavior, but that takes away their opportunities to learn. What I might do with those students is try to structure it so in the first place, they're working with kids who are less likely to do that. So give them some strong tutor partners. And if it does happen, try the proximity, sort of have a continuum of interventions that you would use. I'm going to first try to move closer, or first I'm going to try to pair them with somebody, especially if you have an idea, this is somebody who might do this. I'd pair them up with some well-skilled tutors or partners. I'd move closer as a second level. Third, I might move close and verbally praise others around them who are doing it correctly and just see what happens. And maybe if none of those options work, then I might have a private discussion and really around, oh, you might have been struggling with the tutoring procedures. Because we're really not supposed to be showing this. They're supposed to, something along those lines. But if any of you try this out or you're gearing up to try it, this would be a great topic for our follow-ups. How we can prevent that stuff from happening. Again, thank you guys for hanging in there. Was there anything else?
I just wanted to mention that Dr. Del Prado helped put the course or the session evaluation link in the chat. So we appreciate your feedback. And Dr. Maheady, thank you so much for a really informative presentation. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you all for hanging in there.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thanks, Larry.